12 Christmas movies hit theaters during the 1960s and bombed spectacularly, the same decade that gave us Rudolph and Charlie Brown as television classics. The era that created our most treasured holiday traditions also produced Hollywood's most forgotten and disastrous Christmas failures. Here's what you need to know about Christmas movies in the 1960s before we get into the disasters. Television ownership reached 90% of American homes by 1959, and families who'd relocated to the suburbs during the baby boom suddenly found themselves miles from urban theaters. What they discovered changed everything. Christmas entertainment could come to them at home, completely free. The numbers paint the picture. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer pulled in 55 million viewers in 1964, and the next year A Charlie Brown Christmas played on 49% of every television in America. Those TV specials cost between $200,000 and $500,000 to make, while theatrical Christmas films needed budgets starting at $1 million and climbing to $3 million or higher. Studios were burning through 5 times the money to reach fewer people. Film historians confirm what the box office proved. Hollywood walked away from Christmas films for 2 full decades. The entire genre migrated to television, where Rankin-Bass Productions built an empire with their stop-motion specials that became annual traditions. Studios that ignored this shift and pushed theatrical Christmas movies paid for their mistake. Approximately 12 theatrical Christmas releases appeared across the entire 1960s decade. Hollywood cranked out hundreds of westerns, war films, and musicals during those same 10 years. Christmas abandoned the big screen, and the films that tried to hang on mostly turned into embarrassments. Babes in Toyland hit theaters on December 14, 1961, and instantly became one of Disney's most humiliating failures. Walt Disney poured $3 million into this production, imagining it as his answer to The Wizard of Oz. But Tommy Kirk later summed up the result when he called it sort of a clunker. Trouble started before cameras rolled. Disney fired Ward Kimball, a respected animator, in January 1961 because they clashed over casting. Walt demanded Annette Funicello, the Mouseketeer, for the female lead, and the studio dyed her hair red to make it work. Jack Donahue stepped in as replacement director and inherited a production that never recovered. Ray Bolger, Ed Wynn, and Tommy Sands joined Funicello and Tommy Kirk in what critics described as a garish retelling of the operetta. The reviews came in brutal. The New York Times dismissed it as a glittering bauble for the sub-teen set and warned that adults would need to be awfully young in mind to enjoy it. Variety went harder, declaring that Disney had transformed quaint Toyland into gaudy mechanical Fantasyland and basically created Babes in Disneyland. Time magazine landed the most devastating punch by describing Tommy Sands' performance as hard to swallow as a Vaseline sandwich. The film pulled in $4.6 million in domestic rentals, about $10 million in total gross. Most studios would celebrate those numbers, but Disney operated under different financial expectations and the film couldn't break even. What Disney did next revealed just how embarrassed they were. The studio hauled the film's elaborate sets to Disneyland's Main Street Opera House, hoping park attendants would help recoup some costs. By 1962, they'd dismantled the whole exhibit because, according to one source, the movie bombed and no one wanted to be reminded. Here's the kicker. Babes in Toyland became the only Disney feature film to never get a theatrical re-release. Every other Disney film from that era came back to theaters multiple times, but this one stayed buried. Those marching toy soldiers became the film's only lasting legacy, turning into fixtures at Disney Parks parades and showing up in Mary Poppins 3 years down the line. Jack Donahue pivoted to television, running The Lucy Show and Here's Lucy. Annette Funicello bounced back, starring in American International Pictures' Beach Party franchise. Disney avoided live-action musicals for 3 years until Mary Poppins restored their confidence in 1964. Rotten Tomatoes gives Babes in Toyland a 36% rating today. While Babes in Toyland embarrassed a major studio, Santa Claus conquered American kiddie matinees through pure insanity. This 1959 Mexican film arrived in the United States in 1960 courtesy of distributor K. Gordon Murray, and it featured the most bizarre interpretation of Santa Claus ever put on film. Rene Cardona directed this vision that placed Santa in a castle floating in outer space instead of the North Pole. This space, Santa employed children from every nation rather than elves, kept Merlin the wizard on staff as his assistant, and used surveillance equipment with giant plastic ears to spy on Earth's children. Pitch the Prancing Devil served as the villain sent by Lucifer himself to ruin Christmas, And when Pitch failed his mission, Lucifer threatened to punish him by forcing him to eat chocolate ice cream. Mexican context helps explain why this film turned out so strange. Santa Claus remained largely unknown in Mexico during the late 1950s, where holiday gift-giving traditions centered on the Three Kings and Epiphany on January 6th. The film introduced a foreign concept while creating the most unrecognizable version imaginable. Critics recognized the absurdity despite the film winning the Golden Gate Award for Best International Family Film at the San Francisco International Film Festival in 1959. The New York Times described it as aimed straight at very small fry and noted that adults may find it obvious and square-cut as cheese. Modern audiences rated it 2.8 out of 10 on IMDb, landing it among the lowest-rated Christmas films ever made. K. Gordon Murray's distribution strategy turned Santa Claus into a genuine success anyway. Murray pioneered the kiddie matinee model by marketing directly to children instead of parents, creating theatrical trailers he narrated himself with lines like, "Whether you're in a cave or behind a million mountains, Santa Claus sees you through his master eye." The film opened in October 1960 and played annually at Christmas matinees for nearly 30 years. Cult status came decades later when Mystery Science Theater 3000 featured it in their Christmas Eve 1993 episode, turning the devil character Pitch into a recurring MST3K fixture. Riff Tracks performed a live theatrical riffing in December 2014. The IRS seized Murray's films in 1979 over tax issues, which pushed Santa Claus into the public domain and guaranteed its eternal presence on dollar store DVDs and streaming services. Murray pumped out a series of short films during the 1960s at Santa's Village amusement parks, working in footage from this film. Santa's Magical Kingdom, Santa's Enchanted Village, and Santa and His Helpers extended the bizarre legacy across the decade. Mexican Santa was strange, but Santa Claus Conquers the Martians was just plain incompetent. J-Lore Productions cranked out this film in 10 days during July and August 1964 at Michael Meyerberg Studios on Long Island, distributed by Joseph E. Levine through Embassy Pictures. The production budget stayed under $200,000, and every penny of that limitation screams from the screen. Martian children get depressed watching Earth television in this story, so their parents decide the solution involves taking Santa Claus to bring Christmas joy to Mars. John Call played Santa, and 9-year-old Pia Zadora appeared in an early role. The opening credits misspell costume designer as costume designer, setting the tone for everything that followed. Union crew members worked on this film while simultaneously pulling shifts on Broadway shows like Oliver and Here's Love, which suggests everyone treated it as a quick paycheck. Opening weekend brought in $135,700 from 100 theaters when the film hit Chicago on November 14th and New York on December 16th. Variety and other trades reported it fared poorly in its initial theatrical run, and the New York Times dismissed it as entertainment for very small fry. Joseph E. Levine showed remarkable business sense by recouping costs through annual Christmas matinee re-releases throughout the 1970s. He later admitted his family film strategy. Families don't go see them, they just talk about them. But I make them anyway because I have the protection of television. Money in the bank. The film achieved immortality as a beloved bad movie. Harry Medved put it in his 1984 book, 50 Worst Films of All Time. But here's what matters. It became the only film mocked on all 3 major bad film programs. The Cannes Film Festival, Mystery Science Theater 3000 in 1991, and Cinematic Titanic all took their shots. Riff Tracks performed a live theatrical event in December 2013. Milton DeLugg's theme song, Hooray for Santa Claus, became ironically beloved, and a stage musical adaptation premiered at Chicago's Factory Theater in 1993. Nicholas Webster kept working, directing Mission Mars in 1968 and various television shows. Pia Zadora's career went nowhere until she married millionaire Meshulam Riklis in 1977. She won a controversial Golden Globe for Butterfly in 1981 while simultaneously collecting a Razzie for Worst Actress for the same performance. The film sits at 27% on Rotten Tomatoes and 2.8 out of 10 on IMDb. The Magic Christmas Tree makes Santa Claus Conquers the Martians look like professional filmmaking. This American independent film, shot in Laverne, California, follows a boy named Mark who gets a magic ring from a witch. The ring grows him a talking Christmas tree that grants wishes, somehow involving Santa Claus. The film runs about an hour and looks like someone made it with a Super 8 camera. Every element screams amateur production. Actors who'd never been on camera before, audio that doesn't sync with mouths, editing that makes no sense. One scene shows a man trying to start a lawnmower for several minutes, obvious filler stuffed in to reach feature length. Richard C. Parrish directed what critics consider even worse than Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. IMDb users rated it 2.4 out of 10, dropping it among the lowest-rated Christmas films in history. The production budget was so low and distribution so limited that no box office data exists, which means it probably played bargain basement matinee circuits. RiffTrax's mockery decades later gave the film its only notoriety. Without that exposure, the magic Christmas tree would have vanished from cultural memory completely. It represents the absolute bottom of 1960s Christmas theatrical releases, existing mainly as proof that anyone with a camera could try exploiting the holiday market. Incompetence didn't cause every 1960s Christmas disaster. Jack Frost, originally titled Morozko, started as a 1964 Soviet production that became a genuine cultural phenomenon in Eastern Europe before confusing American audiences with its 1966 English-dubbed release. Alexander Rue directed this traditional Russian fairy tale that mixed Cinderella elements with Slavic folklore. Beautiful Nastenka suffers abuse from her stepmother and spoiled stepsister, while vain Ivan gets transformed into a bear by Father Mushroom as punishment for his pride. Both overcome obstacles with help from Father Frost, known in Russia as Morozko, who tests people's kindness. Elaborate practical effects filled the production, including Baba Yaga the witch with her house perched on chicken legs, walking trees, magic transformations, and real bear cubs trained to pick up mushrooms. Nikolai Budashkin composed a score inspired by Rimsky-Korsakov, and the film showcased the theatrical acting style common in Soviet cinema. Cultural context explains why Americans found this bizarre. Father Frost represents a Russian combination of Santa and winter personified, drawing from pagan heritage. Baba Yaga carries dual nature in Russian folklore, sometimes helping and sometimes harming. The grotesque aesthetics were intentional, and the film referenced fairy tale conventions Americans had never encountered. Morozko became an instant classic in the Soviet Union and Czechoslovakia. Czech and Slovak television created superb dubs, and it still airs annually during Christmas and New Year. Russian channels continue broadcasting it as beloved family tradition. The film won awards in the Soviet Union, and it remains respected for impressive practical effects. Limited theatrical distribution in kiddie matinee circuits met the 1966 American release. The English dub covered dialogue but left songs in Russian, creating an odd hybrid. American viewers unfamiliar with Russian folklore found it confusing and strange. Cult status in America came only after Mystery Science Theater 3000 featured it in 1997, with RiffTrax riffing a restored print titled Father Frost in December 2021. The Coen brothers reportedly told Nicolas Cage that Jack Frost was one of our favorite films. Cage mentioned this to his uncle Francis Ford Coppola, who, according to reports, considered them deranged ever since. The film holds 6.4 out of 10 on IMDb, demonstrating how Cold War cultural exchange brought a Soviet Santa film to American theaters. Soviet cinema confused Americans with unfamiliar folklore, while Italy's contribution to 1960s Christmas cinema just depressed them. The Christmas That Almost Wasn't, an Italian-American co-production filmed in 1965 at Rome's Cinecittà Studios, presented perhaps the most dismal Christmas premise imaginable. Rossano Brazzi directed and starred as villain Phineas T. Prune, a cruel landlord who gets the deed to the North Pole and demands back rent from Santa Claus. Santa can't pay, so he takes a job as a department store Santa to earn money and avoid getting kicked out. Paul Tripp played lawyer Sam Whipple, and Tripp also conceived the project and wrote the script. Drab production values and a gothic atmosphere completely wrong for children's Christmas entertainment compounded the depressing premise. Critics called Santa a whiner instead of the jolly figure audiences expected. The whole thing played like a bizarre art film attempting to deconstruct Christmas mythology, except they marketed it to children. The 1966 theatrical run tanked completely. IMDb users gave it 3.5 out of 10, with most criticism hammering how dreary and depressing it made Christmas feel. Glenn Yarbrough performed the title track, which became the production's only notable element. HBO airings during the 1970s and 1980s gave The Christmas That Almost Wasn't its only real audience, introducing it to families with no other Christmas viewing options. Mystery Science Theater. 3000 featured it in their Netflix revival in 2017, granting it minor cult recognition as a peculiar artifact of international attempts to crack the American holiday film market. The Christmas Tree closed out the decade and achieved something unique, making audiences desperately sad instead of entertained. This French-Italian co-production starred William Holden and opened at Radio City Music Hall on September 25, 1969. Terence Young directed the story of Laurent Ségur, a wealthy French-American widower and World War II veteran who takes his son Pascal camping on a remote Corsican island. A plane carrying a nuclear device crashes and explodes in the ocean during their trip, exposing Pascal to radiation. Doctors diagnose terminal leukemia and give him months to live. Laurent keeps the prognosis from Pascal, and they retreat to a countryside chateau where Laurent, his girlfriend Catherine, played by Verna Lisi, and war buddy Verdun, played by Bourvil, work to fulfill every wish Pascal has. The boy raises wolves as pets, drives a blue tractor, experiences joy while growing progressively weaker, and on Christmas Eve, he passes away under the Christmas tree surrounded by gifts and loyal wolves. Marketing called it the most tearful film of the 60s, an accurate description that couldn't translate into box office success. $200,000 came in during the first week at Radio City Music Hall, but international markets responded only moderately. Roger Ebert's review dripped with sarcasm about the typical millionaire family situations. William Holden made The Christmas Tree the same year The Wild Bunch became his comeback hit. The two films represented complete opposites, violent Western versus sentimental tearjerker. Some speculated Holden made the film responding to critics who attacked him for calling The Wild Bunch violence cathartic. Two versions got made, a continental European cut with Holden dubbed over, and an international English cut. Some prints ran 97 minutes while the official runtime hit 110 minutes, suggesting the film got butchered for different markets. VHS release came later under the title When Wolves Cry. Christmas connection runs through the entire final act, and the boy passes away specifically on Christmas Eve under the Christmas tree. The Christmas setting provides ironic contrast to the tragedy, making the holiday itself feel melancholic. IMDb users gave it 6.3 out of 10. Quality Christmas filmmaking remained possible in the 1960s, and cash on demand proved it. This Hammer Film Productions thriller hit United States theaters on December 20th, 1961, showing that the right approach could still work. Quentin Lawrence directed this film based on the TV play The Gold Inside, shooting it in just 13 days during April 1961 on a budget of £37,000, roughly $60,000. Limited money forced creative efficiency. The entire film takes place in a bank interior, manager's office, vault, and stairway. Peter Cushing stars as Harry Fordyce, a Scrooge-like bank manager terrorizing his staff 2 days before Christmas. Andre Morell plays Colonel Gore Hepburn, appearing as an insurance inspector before revealing himself as a bank robber who's taken Fordyce's family hostage and forces the manager to help loot the vault. A street Santa rings his bell in the snow during the opening, establishing Christmas atmosphere immediately. Fordyce's cold exterior cracks as tension builds, and by the end, he joins the staff Christmas party he'd always skipped before. The Christmas Carol parallels were deliberate. A cold manager learns humanity through crisis. Steve Chibnall and Brian McFarlane, respected film historians, selected Cash on Demand as one of 15 most meritorious British B films made between World War II and 1970. They specifically praised Peter Cushing's performance for lifting the film well above the perfunctory levels of much B filmmaking. 18 minutes separated the British print from the American version that played Columbia Pictures theaters. Box office data doesn't exist for this second feature, but critical response came back positive. TCM's Eddie Muller featured it on Noir Alley, and modern critics call it an underrated gem. Cash on Demand proves the 1960s Christmas theatrical drought wasn't about quality being impossible, it was pure economics. A focused, well-made thriller could succeed artistically, but even Hammer's excellence couldn't overcome the basic problem. Several ultra-obscure Christmas films attempted theatrical release during the 1960s beyond the major disasters, and vanished almost instantly. The Miracle of Santa's White Reindeer appeared in 1963 as an hour-long independent feature with Charles Winninger as Santa, joined by Fritz Feld, Ruth Robinson, Dennis Holmes, and Hal Smith. Film histories barely document it. No box office records exist. A Visit to Santa arrived at the end of 1963 as a 12-minute short from Clem Williams Films. Credits stopped at the opening title. Two children wonder if Santa got their letter. Then we see Santa reading it in what minimal documentation calls a spacious living room setting. Santa visits the magic land of Mother Goose, supervised by J. Edwin Baker in 1967, sat unreleased until 1974, 7 years after production wrapped. Even then, only brief Baltimore area distribution happened. The hour-long feature has no available cast information and essentially no documentation. These films show how the 1960s theatrical Christmas drought hit every budget level. Major studios like Disney failed. Exploitation distributors like K. Gordon Murray succeeded through annual re-releases. Mid-level productions struggled. Ultra-low-budget independents just disappeared into obscurity. 12 Christmas films reached theaters during the 1960s and told a larger story about changing entertainment consumption. Rudolph pulled 55 million television viewers, and Charlie Brown played on nearly half of all American televisions, while theatrical releases embarrassed Disney with Babes in Toyland, turned Santa Claus Conquers the Martians into a joke, and couldn't help even quality productions like Cash on Demand overcome basic economic reality.